So this is my contact information. If there's any desire, and it is on the slides. One of the reasons I hand out the copy of the slides that I'll be going through is I'm the kind of person when I'm at a presentation and I'm watching a PowerPoint and I like to take notes, I like to put the notes next to the slide kind of a thing. And so that's meeting my need, and I don't know how many out there of you are like me. So that's why I would rather have you have it. You can do with this what you want. You can make notes on it, you can refer to it, you can set it aside and just listen. Whatever you want to do, that's totally up to you. Just real quickly, I oversee, and Lucy's part of my staff, I oversee what's called the Family Caregiver Support Center at the Pikes Peak Area Agency on Aging. And our primary responsibility is to help family members figure out the puzzle of caregiving. In other words, I need help, I don't know where to go, I know I need some additional resources and whatnot, but I don't know who to talk to. And lately, what's been happening is caregivers are telling me when we talk to them on the phone, I've called 15 people, nobody's returning my calls, you're the first person to return my call. Okay, so when you leave messages for us, you will not go into phone cyberspace. Okay, because that's a personal thing for me, is to return all phone calls. And if I don't talk to you, I will leave multiple messages, like once every other day or something like that. And I'll do that for 3 times and then we stop. But we will contact you. So with that said, next slide. So C.S. Lewis, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. Please keep that in mind, because that's going to come into play as we go through the presentation today. And then Carl Jung, one cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of one's morning. For what was great in the morning will be of little importance in the evening, and what in the morning was true will at the evening have become a lie. The other way to say that is things change. Okay? Next slide. So, we're going to be focused on finding your purpose, and I'm going to take you through a process that will help you understand that. And then near the end, one of the last slides, there's going to be some questions, and those are going to be tasks for you to do if you choose to do them. Okay? And those tasks will begin to help you get in touch with what your purpose in life may be. So, with that said, finding and living our life purpose is to help our soul mature, to help the souls of others mature. And that was from Alexandra Solzhenitsyn from the book, The Gulag Archipelago. Okay? Our purpose in life is to be connected to each other. And the reason I want to emphasize that is because we've been living in a society, I have grown up in a society where my values have been to be independent, self-sufficient. I don't need your help. Thank you very much. In this society, we train people not to be interdependent or even to be dependent on others. Okay? But in order to find our purpose, we have to be connected to people. That's the simplicity of it. And that's also the challenge. Next slide. So, our purpose provides the opportunity for our soul, our beingness, to express itself. You're going to hear in the presentation, I'm going to be talking about things like the first stage of life, the second stage of life. The second stage of life is about being. Another way to say that is that's our soul. That's what inhabits us. Okay, that's what we are here for, the purpose for our soul or being to experience certain things. Our purpose can change daily, yearly, monthly, weekly, hourly. Our purpose changes. And our purpose may be to sit quietly with a friend, or to gather resources, or to ... I've been at the area agency for 16 years doing the Family Caregiver Support Center. But before that, my first 15 years as a social worker I was a hospice social worker. In my hospice work, I learned rather quickly how to sit at somebody's bedside and to shut up and to just patiently hold the hand. Okay. And what that taught me was the value of being in someone's presence. The other part of purpose is one activity can have a different purpose. Your daily walk can be for exercise or it can be to meditate. Every morning, I get up at a certain time, I won't say how early, but I make a commitment to walk about 3 to 4 miles. I prefer to do it outside. If the weather won't let me, then I go to Planet Fitness and walk on the treadmill. But I prefer outside. And the reason I put this part on this slide is because what I've noticed is when I walk, there are days where I'm walking for the exercise, not thinking about anything, not processing anything, not focusing on anything. And then there are days and times where when I'm walking, it's more about meditation, more about centering. And usually on my walks, when I'm doing the meditation, and I actually, on today's walk, I did both. The first 2 miles were about exercise. The last 2 miles were about meditating. And on the last 2 miles today, the meditation that I do, it's in sync with my pace. And I repeat a group of 4 words over and over. Love, peace, wisdom, justice, courage, trust, hope, joy. And I just repeat those pairs, and I did that for the 2 walks. But the thing I've noticed, and the reason it's a meditation for me, is because people come to mind. And sometimes people will come to mind when I say a certain word, or a series of words, or if I'm concerned about somebody and they want me to hold them up in prayer, what I will do is I will say that meditation of 8 words. And the other way I meditate is I will, during my walk, say, I am grateful for, and then whatever comes to mind. Okay? And it's been interesting because there have been times where when I say I am grateful for, and the words just come out. I don't have to think or whatnot. And then there are times where I've gone through a whole stream of words. I think I'm on a roll. And then I'll say, I am grateful for. Nothing comes out. But I've learned to realize nothing has to come out because it can be as simple as I am grateful. Okay. But things that we do, daily activities. I have a dear friend. I'm going to be speaking with her at an AARP caregiver conference in Denver next month. She has a routine where she has a cup of tea every morning. And like me, she'll take that routine and she'll turn it into a meditation when she begins to focus. So rather than taking the normal tea, she's got some special tea that she knows her mom really loved when mom was alive. And she'll use that tea and she'll brew it and she'll just sit at the table and smell the aroma of that tea and think about mom. And so for her, that's how she changes a routine into a meditation. So it can be the simple things that you do daily, you can turn into meditation kinds of things. Next slide. So the best expression of purpose is when being ourselves, we are truly unaware of our service, support, or help. And that may sound kind of odd, but it also expresses something about me as a person. I'm very thankful for the comments that both of you have made. about me before we got started. But I don't do this for that purpose. And when I talk to caregivers, I'm not aware. I've had caregivers come back to me and say, I remember when you said this, this, or this, and it was life-changing. And I'm going, okay. Because when I said it, I wasn't even unaware of how it was going to touch or move that person. I just said it, okay? So the best expression is when we're doing things, but we're truly unaware of the value that we're giving when we do that. And then your purpose may be to present, which may be to be present, which allows others to express their purpose. Like, there were times when I was doing my visits as a hospice social worker, and I would walk out of the house, and the question was, who helped who? And especially on times where I would just sit and let them process and let them talk, and not try to direct, not try to correct, none of that. I just let them talk, okay? The other is, and sometimes it even happens with the consultations we do. I was aware one time that I was in the presence of an angel learning from her life lessons. Because I knew what she was sharing with me, I could feel the uniqueness of what she was sharing, but I could also feel the pain and the hurt where it was coming from, and the maturity that she had and that she picked up from going through all of that. And so sometimes when we're doing our purpose, depending on what we're doing, it's more a matter of us being there, and because we're there, other things are happening. And we need to let those things happen and then try to learn from why they happened and why they went down the way they did. Next slide. So, Carl Jung and Father Richard Rohr, in fact, Father Richard Rohr, he is a Catholic mystic, and he does the Center for Action and Contemplation down in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And he founded it. The last couple of months, he stepped back because of his age, and he's letting other people take over the work. But the reason I'm mentioning him is because he uses Carl Jung's. Carl Jung is the one that, as a psychologist, said there's two halves to life. There's the first half and the second half. And the first half of life is to build a strong container. The first half of life is where we develop our identity. Who am I? And usually that who am I is when if you've ever gone to a conference or a meeting and they're doing the, pair up with somebody and introduce yourself. How do you introduce yourself? You talk about things like, well, this is where I work. I'm married or not married. I've got kids or grandkids, or these are my hobbies or whatever. So you describe yourself by the things that you do, okay? That's the container for the first half of life. I went to a conference shortly after I started as a hospice social worker. It was about grief. And the speaker started, there's about 200 of us in the room. And so he did the typical divide into pairs. So we all divided into pairs. And he said, I want you to introduce yourself to each other. The first person has 2 minutes to introduce themselves. I'll call time. And then the second person introduces themselves for 2 minutes. So we did that. And at the end of the 4 minutes, we all came back together. He said, how did it go? And there was, everyone goes, oh yeah, great, all that kind of stuff. And when we were introducing ourselves, there was a dull roar in the room, okay? He said, now I want you, same person you were with before, same pair. I want you to introduce yourselves again, same 2 minutes, then break, and then the next person. Here's the rule. You can't share anything you shared the first time. It's got to be new stuff. So we did that. We did that 6 times. Here's what happened to the volume in the room. The first couple of times it was like way up here. By the fifth or sixth time, it was way down here. And by the fourth, fifth, or sixth time, he was looking around the room and pairs were talking. Why? Because they had run out of things to describe themselves. They had run out of things on their identity. Okay? The second half of life is to find the contents, the container the container was meant to hold. In other words, the contents is our being. That soul that's inside of us. The other way to say it is to discover our purpose. And I'm not downplaying anything that happens in the first stage of life. I'm just saying that in order to find our purpose, in order to move in that direction, and for it to be a true, genuine purpose that rings with our beingness, that rings with our soul, we need to spend time with who we are completely. All of this stuff that we're comfortable telling people about, but then also all of the stuff that we are not comfortable with telling people about. The things that are, quote, in the closet, the things that we don't like, the things that we're ashamed of. We've got to be comfortable with that stuff because that's part of who we be. Okay, and that's the second half of life is finding what goes into that container. The first half of life is the survival dance. I can't follow my dream of being an astronaut because I probably don't have the skills, so I have to settle for doing this or this. Or I'll use my oldest daughter as an example. She was a dancer from the time she started to walk, and music would come on, the TV and whatnot, and she was dancing, and so she took dance classes and everything else. And we didn't consciously say this, but normally with something like that, if she was said, I want to grow up and be a professional dancer, sometimes what you hear is, oh no, honey, that we know you love to dance, but how are you going to make money to live? Okay, so then what happens? The dancer gets put on the shelf, and then you wind up doing something that you can make money. But what you're doing to make money isn't your purpose, because your real purpose was the joy that your soul had by dancing. So how do you figure out how to do that with purpose? Okay, so the second half of life is the sacred dance. Sacred meaning it's what we do to get us connected and stay connected to our soul, to our beingness. Okay, so the first half is the survival. Second half is the sacred. Next slide. So the life stages, the survival dance. It's things like being assertive. Because if you're not assertive, you're going to get run over. If you're not assertive, you're going to get abused. If you're not assertive, you're going to be taken advantage of. Seeking and getting what you desire. And oftentimes what you desire is what society is telling you to desire. The American dream. The house. The boat. The cabin. 2 cars. The specific types of cars. The way you dress. You have to dress a certain way. All of that is the getting what you desire. But the desire is family or society is telling you what to desire. And it's defined by laws and tribal expectations. So we've got laws that keep society from being totally chaotic. It still is chaotic, but the laws that we have keep it from just breaking down in utter chaos. Tribal expectations are the things that your parents taught you. Those values that your parents gave you. Like, I was born into a family that went to church on a regular basis, and my grandparents went to church on a regular basis. So one of the tribal expectations is you go to church. I was baptized as an infant. I went to Sunday school. I went to church every Sunday, and we would sit in the pews. And part of my learning how to read was because I remember we had to even though we couldn't sing or read, we had to open up the hymnal to the correct hymn in the hymn book and had to follow along. And if we didn't follow along, we felt something physical. But I remember the joy of being able to say, oh, I know that word. And then it became sentences. And then, sing it along. And our parents felt good because they were raising kids that felt comfortable in church. Okay. And so we had all of those faith values instilled in us from our family. Okay. And because it was the church, those beliefs became attached with the heavier expectation of its doctrine. It's the church teachings. And depending on the church you're in, there is minimal or there's a variance of how flexible you interpret those teachings. Most of them are, in most churches, there is no flexibility. This is what you will believe. But it all falls into here. Okay? That's part of what forms us and develops us. And then learning rules, orders, traditions, and beliefs. Things like, if you talk back to your parents, you're going to get smacked. Or if you'll get spanked. And so you had to learn the rules, you had to learn the traditions, you had to learn the beliefs in order to exist. And if you didn't learn those rules, orders, and beliefs, you were considered abnormal or an outcast or weird or whatever. But you weren't part of that community because you weren't following those traditions or beliefs or whatnot. So in this first stage of life, there's a huge effort to make you fit the mold. And if you fit the mold, you're fine. And then it's about excluding. You can't have a tribe. The tribe gets its best identity by what it is not. We're not like those people. We're not like that person. This is what we do. It's better. And so the first stage of life is about excluding. Because part of the exclusion is it validates, in an odd way, it validates that what you believe is correct. It may not be correct on a soul level, but in the survival dance, it's correct. Stage 2 is the sacred dance. This is where it gets wonky. Because in the sacred dance, it's about unlearning rather than learning. In order to find your purpose, you may have to unlearn things that you were taught. You may have to let go of beliefs that when you were younger, you would have sworn that's the way it is. But in order to be comfortable in your life's purpose, you're going to have to let go of some of that stuff. It's about letting go rather than holding on. And the reason it's about letting go I'm back. The reason it's about letting go is whatever you want to call it, whether it's God, whether it's life, whether it's the universe, whether it's spirit, whether it's angels, whatever term you use, universe, it cannot give you what you want while you are holding on to this. Why? Because your hand is full. And the only way you can get what you want to really receive is to open up, let go, and then whatever term you want to use, it's provided for you. And then it's losing in order to gain. You have to, depending on what you're holding on to, I mean, this is just a bottle of water, but You could be holding on to the value of, I do pretty well with money. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in a bankruptcy. Or our marriage is really good. And then your wife says to you, we're getting a divorce. And takes the kid with her. Those are losses. Or you go to the doctor, and the doctor says you have stage 3 cancer. What are you losing with that? You've done everything right. And yet the doctor said you got stage 3 cancer. What are you losing? But you have to figure that out because that's your starting point. And stage 2 is about inclusion rather than exclusion. It's about including those things that you normally would exclude. It's about one of my wife's cousins, they live in Loveland, and years and years and years ago, probably around early 2000, we got an email, and at that point they had 2 boys and both of them were in high school. And Julie was just upset because one of the boys came out and said he was gay. What do? Especially when you are a member of a Lutheran church that says that's bad. Do you follow what your church believes and reject your son? Or do you accept your son and learn how to experience love and support in a totally different way? So this teaches you how to love one way. When you're moving over to here and you have to deal with something like that, you're having to learn how to love in a very, very different way. And you have to work at this because this side says you got to exclude. And when you're over here, you're going, I can't do that. And that's part of what makes this process so challenging, is because, and you'll understand this when we get near the end of the presentation, this whole process, first stage, second stage, it's not, okay, I'm a certain age and I should be moving into the second stage. This process of going back and forth has been happening your entire life, which is part of the reason for the presentation, is to make you aware of this isn't anything new. You've been experiencing this all of your life. All you have to do is think about the challenges that have knocked you on your butt, because those are God's ways, the universe's way of saying, I want you to move from survival into sacred. Next slide. So in terms of the life balance, the balance between the first and second halves of lives is often reflected in metaphors. Things like, and I didn't put it up there, but you can probably tell which side, looking at those words, take a little bit of time, and then tell me which side is stage 1 and which side is stage 2.
Stage 1 is on the left.
Yeah, stage 1 is on the left, stage 2 is on the right. Okay? Beginner, proficient, novice, initiated, milk, meat, letter, spirit. Letter of the law, spirit of the law. Apprentice, master, morning, evening. Okay, next slide. So, both halves are cumulative and essential. So it's not like one is better than the other. And both of them are cumulative in terms of they keep building. Okay, all of those life challenges you've had that have been challenging you to move from the first to the second stage, when you're in the second stage, you're learning new things and seeing and perceiving things in a new way. And then when another life challenge comes up and you're being bumped from the survival into the sacred, you're at a slightly different level when you come over to the sacred another time, because you already have some experience with the sacred by being bumped into it the first several times. So it's cumulative. It builds. Moving between halves is not a result of age, but of life experiences. And to really move, the container we created in the first half of life must stretch, it must tear, it must change in its present form. If you want to have a really good visual, the best one is out of the scriptures when you talk about putting new wine in old wineskins. Because if you put new wine in an old wineskin, it's just going to break it. That's a perfect analogy of this. Okay? And the old needs to be replaced with something new. Think about your life and all of your life experiences. You are not the same person you were 2 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago. You are a totally different person. Why? Because you are constantly replacing the old with something new, and you're working on that cumulative experience. That's where the wisdom comes from. That's where the insights come from. Next slide. So, a little bit about initiation rites. They were common in ancient and indigenous cultures. Native Americans, a male would turn a certain age and they would go off into the wilderness and spend 3, 4, 5 days and pretty much sometimes come close to physical death. And then come back, and they would come back. They were on what they call a vision quest. And they would come back after experiencing the vision, and they would have a new name to go by. And it wasn't the old name that they left, it was a new name. And then they were given new roles and responsibilities in the tribe. But they had to go through that near-death experience to get that. Initiation rites were used to break down the ego state created in the first half of life in order to create a greater sense of awareness through being. One of the issues with the first stage of life, it is very ego-driven. I'm right, you're wrong. No, this is up, that's down. And it's also very dualistic. It's either this or it's this. Okay? And that's what has to be broke open, is that ego state. And by doing that, because the ego is the one that we're most aware of because it lives in our thinking brain, okay? And so that's the one we're most comfortable with. But if you've ever had the experience of sheer joy, utter despair, or because of a death or whatnot, and you are grieving like you've never grieved before, those are examples of a greater sense of awareness in your soul, in your being. Because we try to protect ourselves from going there, and we will use any excuse not to go there, because it's scary. And the initiation rites forced the death of old beliefs and ideals so new beliefs and ideals could begin. Example, I went through bankruptcy. And I went through the shame and the guilt and the fear and all of that. And a lot of it was shame because my tribal beliefs told me I didn't manage my money well. My tribal beliefs told me that I made huge mistakes and I wasn't good at managing money and all that kind of stuff. And I put my family at risk, all of that stuff. And those are the old beliefs. The new beliefs that came out of that were, it wasn't that bad. And my beliefs about money changed. Why did I work so hard to try to do things and maintain things and put myself in debt? And because that was broken wide open because of the bankruptcy, I was able to begin to let go of some of those beliefs. I don't have to have this. I don't have to live this way. I don't have to try to get this and this and this and this. Because it's distracting me and it's keeping me away from who I really am. And the same with going through the divorce. So when I said, the life experience, and your wife says she wants a divorce and she takes the kid, that's what happened to me. And I was, my parents had gone through divorce, so it wasn't like it was new. But I still had all of those beliefs. Plus, at that time, I was what they called a director of Christian education in the Lutheran Church, which meant I was a professional staff person in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And divorce was not good. And I knew of experiences where pastors and DCEs who got a divorce, the church said, bye, you're damaged goods. And I was going through all of the grief and the confusion and everything from the divorce, but two major things happened that I learned from. One is my church surrounded me. My wife still kept coming so she and I were going in the same church because our daughter at that point was 2 or 3 years old. And so both of us agreed we're not going to let our issues affect her. We tried to minimize that as much as possible. One of them was still maintaining, I was working in the church and she was a member of the church. And it really confused some of the members at church because they knew we were going through a divorce, had gotten a divorce, and yet we could be seen sitting together in church. What was that? The other one was, there was every month, all of the directors of Christian education, and we were living in Phoenix at the time, so it was like about 10 or 12 of us, we had a monthly meeting. And at one of the monthly meetings, at every monthly meeting, we would go around and say, so how's it going? And so we were doing it at this monthly meeting, and it came to me, and I said, I'm not doing well. And then I started to explain, and even now it's bringing tears to my eyes. I started to share the hurt that I had, and the fear, and all of that. And I started to break down, and I was literally heaving from the sobbing and the crying. It was that deep. And what my fellow DCEs did, they didn't say a word. In silence, they all got up. I was sitting in a chair. They all got up, and the ones closest to me laid hands on me, and the ones who weren't that close to me laid hands on the person in front of them, and they just stood there. And they let me cry. And that gave me new insight and new beliefs into what the church really is. No judgment, no condemnation, total and pure acceptance. And it was wonderful. And like I said, my eyes still get watered when I talk about that. And that was like maybe, I was 87. So that's close. It's coming up on, it's almost 30 years ago, more than that. Okay. Next slide. So initiation rites. They are specific life events serve as our initiation rites into the state of being. And these include failed relationships, substance abuse, illness, disease, homelessness, birth, adoption, change in religion, public recognition, accidents, bankruptcy, employment, victim of a crime, caregiving, change in work, graduations. Initially, when I had this list, and I've done this section of this presentation and other presentations, and after the presentation, several people come up and say, because originally this list had nothing positive in it. It was all negative. And so they would say, so why don't you have positive stuff in there, like graduations or birth or marriage or whatnot? And I thought about that, and so I added them in, okay, because they fit what I'm going to be telling you about what an initiation rite does. They can be as intense, but most of the time they are not as intense as the negative ones. Because the negative ones are the ones that literally knock you on your butt. Okay, so both are good because they change things on a radical scale. But the negative ones are the ones that really are there to try to get your attention. Next slide. So our initiation rites can be chosen or forced upon us. Chosen meaning I choose to graduate. Chosen means I want to get married. Chosen means sometimes let's have a kid. And the reason I say sometimes is because you always see, you know, she comes out of the bathroom, I'm pregnant, and he's going, oh yeah. Okay. So they're either chosen or forced on us, and they create change that can be confusing and disorienting. So that's why I put the positive ones up there. Because when you're going through the birth of a child, it changes everything. You can't do things the way you used to do because now you've got this little person that you are responsible for 100% of the time, completely. They're totally dependent on you. Or graduating. I spent X number of years in school. Now I don't have school. What do I do? I mean, for me, when I was working on my graduate degree at Arizona State University to get my master's degree in social work, the initiation rite for me was at the age of 35, I was back in school for full time. And I can remember walking around the campus at ASU, and a lot of times I'm going, what the hell am I doing here? Because everybody was 10, 15, 20 years younger than I was. And I'm really going, why? What did I do? Was this a huge mistake? So it was really disorienting. Initiation rites, if forced, often feel like we are hitting bottom. And that's purposeful. Because sometimes it's hitting the bottom that jars us into realizing that we need to make some changes and do things differently. And then they are life-transforming events that create liminal space. So everybody's going, what's liminal space? Next slide. Oh yeah, there it is. So liminal space is an inner state created by an outer situation for the purpose of thinking in new ways. So the outer issue is you've just gone through a bankruptcy and you find yourself questioning, how did I get here? What did I do? What did I do wrong? How can I correct that? All of that kind of questioning, and that's the inner state. You begin to, rather than look outward, you're starting to look inward to say, how did I create this? Okay? But it's that outer situation that forces you to go inward. And it's characterized a lot of times by silence, because you really don't know what to say, who to say it to, how to say it. So the better tact is just shut up and not say anything. Hopefully, if I'm silent and don't talk about it, it's going to go away. Solitude, depending on what the situation is, people who used to be around you no longer want to be around you. Fasting, Most of us don't eat well when we're under stress. There are some people who they eat far too well because that's what the stress does. But there's a feeling of emptiness, confusion, anonymity, and lack. And this all comes because we're trying to figure out what happened with the container that we created in the first stage of life. Because that container the container didn't work. Because if it worked, I wouldn't be here in the state of confusion and anxiety and everything else. But it's the place where the transition begins. You have to go through this. Next slide. So the transitions are the turning point, and they're needed for the growth and the expression of the true self. It's kind of like, and nature's always, creation and nature is always a great example. The two things, and by the way, if you've never heard me present, oftentimes I will say this. I think in pictures, and the two pictures that just came to mind when I read this was one, I'm a cat person, and every now and then, especially when we do a poor job of trimming their nails, what we see on the floor, because we have hardwood floors, what we see are the shells of the nails, because their nails grow, but in order for them to grow, they have to break that old casing and shed it. Crustaceans do the same thing. How do lobsters grow? How do oysters, the creatures that live in the shells that we find on the beaches, they're constantly shedding those in order for them to grow, and they create new shells around them. Okay, so nature's a classic example of we have to go through those transitions. We have to be broken. We have to be open in order to continue to grow. And the transitions take longer than you think, but not longer than you need. The best example I have of that was when I was going through my divorce, and I said to my wife, we need to go to counselor. We had been to counselors 2 times before, and then I should have been picking up clues because I was doing the homework, but she wasn't. But I had my head in the sand and going, no, that's not that bad. But anyway, so I said, let's go to counselor. And she said, I will go. And this is what I love about her. She still respected my need. She said, I will go, but you need to know it's not going to change anything. I'm still getting a divorce. I said, okay. So we went to the counselor, and I was talking about everything that had been going on. And we got to a point, she said, thank you. And she said, you can leave now, Ken. And I said, okay. And then she said, because I want to talk to Joe without you around. I said, okay. And I had brought my date book. And so before I left her office, I set a date. I think it was, I was able to come back the next week. And that started a 10-month counseling relationship with her because I really, really liked her and I was following my intuition. So I walked out with a counseling appointment. And so we were doing counseling, and it was probably July, and I went in for my normal counseling session, and she said, so how are things going? I said, great, it feels great. I think we're getting close to done. She said, let's talk about your dad. I said, this is a quote. I said, what the hell does my dad have to do with my divorce? She said, let's talk about your dad. Which was her way of saying very politely, no, we're not done. Okay? With what then started phase 2 and 3 of the counseling session. But I'm sharing that with you because I thought I was done. She knew I wasn't. And then when we did get to the end, she was the one that said, I think we're done. And it was a lot longer than what I thought. But my ending point was different than where she wanted me to be. Okay. Transitions also There are turning points that change how we see ourselves and how we see others. I saw myself totally different. I would not have learned about myself in the depth that I did if I had not gone through the divorce and gone through the counseling. And I would not have learned as much about myself if I had not become a social worker and spent time with my hospice patients and family members. Okay. Transitions change how we see ourselves and how we see others and relate to them, pure and simple. And then transitions are the turning points are essential to life as they season and mature our souls. Like I had said before, I am not the same person. I am much deeper emotionally, spiritually, however you want to say it, because of all the crap I've gone through in my life. But also because of all the good things that have happened in my life, both. Both of those have made me into the person that I am right now here with you. And I know that, and that's the other reason, I'm teaching to myself and talking to myself as much as I am to you. Because that's how I learn. I learn best when I'm teaching others. It's this whole thing of the teacher will appear when the student is ready. All of you are students, but all of you are teachers as well. You have things in your life that you have experienced that qualify you to be a teacher to other people. But at the same time, like me, all of you are still students, seeking to learn, wanting to learn. And that's the challenge is to, and I'm talking to myself when I say this, is when those difficult life situations come up, there's a reason they're coming up. What's the reason? What am I supposed to learn? How am I supposed to grow from this life experience? Next slide. So purpose, finally, he's getting to purpose. Okay, so purpose is discovering our life's purpose. Discovering our life's purpose requires that we live with and acknowledge our failures and successes, our fears and our hopes, our grief and our joy. We have to dance with our shadow self. Have you ever played the game of trying to make your shadow disappear? And if you ever played that game as a kid, how successful were you? The only way you were successful, literally, is if you stood in, you found a big tree and you stood in the shadow of the tree. Or you went inside the closet, which is where, by the way, from an analogy terminology, the closet is where our shadow self is. So when we try to hide from our shadow self, literally, we go into the very closet where the shadow exists. Does that make sense? Finding our purpose requires two things: that we die to self in order to create new outlets, and that we shed our old ways in order to create new life patterns. Finding your life purpose will change who you are. And you may find it but not know it. It's only been literally the last couple years, months, whatnot, where I have truly become to understand what my life's purpose is. I've been living it a lot since I became a social worker, but I was totally unaware of it. So you can be doing your life purpose and not really know that you're doing it. It is possible. Next slide. So remember the 2 points I just mentioned? One of them, creating new outlets. So creating new outlets, finding your life purpose is a transformation that will make you You can become a mentor, a teacher of life lessons. Or you can become a mediator, the resolver of conflicts. Or you can become a monitor, the watchdog of public and corporate entities. And even private entities, it should also say. You can become a mobilizer, a mover, a shaker for needed change. Or you can become a motivator, urging people from self-interest to social change. You can do one of these, a number of these, all of these, but that's creating the new outlet is, I'm going to be a mentor. I'm going to share my life experiences with other people, whether that's formally, like in a class setting like this, or whether it's informally, and you take people under your wings. It's like my grandfather, who he was a mentor, he didn't know it, but when we were in high school and we didn't have enough money to buy our own car, he bought a car for my brother and I. And part of the deal for him doing that was that we had to learn how to maintain the car. He was a self-taught mechanic. So on Saturdays and Sundays, oftentimes we found ourselves under the car, in the car, and he was teaching us how to do the basic repairs. He was a mentor. He was teaching us. He was sharing his life wisdom. You could be that mediator, that resolver of conflicts. So you choose which these that you want to do that you're comfortable with. Okay, that's one of the steps of doing your life purpose. And sometimes the light bulb will go off and go, oh, I'm already doing that. I already, because I've had conversations with people and I'm always telling people to stop doing this because it's damaging the environment, or it's hurting this, or it's hurting that. And if you're doing that, even on a small scale, one-to-one, you are a motivator. This doesn't mean you have to do it on a large scale. Whatever scale you're doing it on, you're doing it. And it's just as valid. Next slide. Shedding old ways. The shedding our old ways, there's 5 tasks. The first task is harvesting, and that's coming to terms with the past in order to face the current reality. Yeah, I screwed up. Yeah, I wasn't such a good dad when I did this or that. Or I messed up as a social worker when I did this or when I did that. I shouldn't have talked that harshly to that caregiver, whatever it may be. But it's coming to terms with those past mistakes to say, I'm not perfect. I'm still learning. I've learned a lot, but I'm still in the process of learning. That's harvesting our life. Okay? It's accepting the good and it's accepting the bad. And the one thing that we do very poorly in our life is this. Because we're told not to. Because it'll take away your motivation. You will be narcissistic. You're focused on yourself. Why do you want to focus on yourself? You have to focus on other people and be a servant and give and give and give and give and give and give. And those are old beliefs that you just heard come out of my mouth. And there's a reason they just came out of my mouth, because those are the things that get in the way of harvesting our lives. Harvesting our life is celebrating our life, the good and the bad. And we need people around us to help us celebrate. He wasn't one of my hospice patients, but his wife came into the center years ago, and she was one of the caregivers that I helped. And later on, he became eligible for hospice, and he was on hospice care. And it was the hospice that my wife happened to be the chaplain for. So this is why I know what was happening. But what they decided to do before he died was, you know how when a person dies, you go to the celebration of life. I've been to a lot of them. And there have been some that I've been to, and when they're talking about the person, I'm going, you talking about the same person? I don't know. I didn't know that, but the harvesting, the celebrating of the person's life comes after they're dead. How helpful is that to them in terms of fulfilling their life? They're already dead. They're gone. We should be shifting that and doing that so it happens before we die, which is why I'm telling this story. This person was on hospice care and he was getting weaker, but this had come up. And so what they decided to do is they were going to go back to Phoenix, which is where they spent most of their life. And they did 2 celebrations of life in Phoenix. One was at the Catholic Church, where they had been longtime members. And then the other one was, I forgot where it was, but it was more of a social kind of a gathering. And all of the friends showed up and they just celebrated and they talked about stories. They told the old, what people call war stories. Oh yeah, I remember that and I remember that. And they just had fun celebrating his life. And the third celebration of life was when he came back home and all of the people in their community, in their neighborhood came together and they just had a celebration and sharing all of the stories. And he was the center of it all. Huge, huge gift to him because it helped him understand that his life made a difference and how his life made a difference. And if there's one thing I learned as a hospice social worker, it's not sometimes good. I won't share that story, but to say to the person who's having trouble dying, it's okay to go. I did that when I was a young hospice social worker, and the 91-year-old lady sat bolt right up in bed, said, "Hell no, I'm not ready to go. Get the hell out of here." And she kicked me out. She literally kicked me out. But what I learned is all of us, we need to know that our life has made a difference. It's like the footprints in the sand. We need to know that we've left a trail. How do we know that? We need other people telling us that. And the only way we get that is if we do this, the harvesting. The second task is dealing with failures, seeing blessings in our failures. My wife, the best way to describe Nita, the Cliff Notes version of describing her as her personality is, she's a Pollyanna. She always sees the silver lining. She always sees the good. Always, always, always. For me, who's not one of those people, even after 30-some years of marriage, I still go, oh, God. Really? But this is key because there are blessings. If I hadn't gone through my divorce, would never have met my wife. And if I hadn't met my wife, a lot of other things that have occurred in my life wouldn't have happened. She was the one that I had made a decision to look for an advanced degree for a lot of different reasons, but I wasn't sure I could do it. And she was my strongest cheerleader. I probably would not have taken those steps because she was back behind me going, pushing me all the way. Okay. The other thing about dealing with failures is they provide a deepened maturity. The facts were the facts, but the conclusions were wrong. What we believe about our tribal beliefs oftentimes don't fit what's currently going on in our life. The story that I told about her cousin Julie and her son coming out of the closet and saying I'm gay. The facts were the facts, but the conclusions were wrong. The original tribal conclusions were, you're bad, you have to be excluded. You're no longer a member of the family. But the real, and that would be a wrong conclusion. The real conclusion was, we still love you, we still accept you. How are we going to do this together as a family? Task number 3 is healing relationships. That starts with forgiving yourself by releasing past hurts and resentments. You cannot forgive anybody until you forgive yourself. Pure and simple. If you have not forgiven yourself, it will always get in the way of forgiving anybody else. So that's where it starts. Next slide. Task number 4, expanding potential. How do you do that? One is practicing forgiveness for yourself and then for others. It's hard to reach your full potential when you're carrying something on your back that's 80 pounds. And that 80-pound backpack that you're carrying is shame, disbelief, whatever you want to call it. But the additional energy you have to expend by carrying all of that past with you is interfering with you reaching your full potential. And so you literally have to lay it down and leave it and know that it's okay in order to reach your full potential, which is why we go through the transitions, which is why we're in the liminal space. Because that's where we're being forced to say, was it worth carrying all that crap? Why not lay it down? And then the other part of expanding potential is recognizing the interdependence of the world. God's creation is interdependent. From the beginning, it has been that way. Which is why and I've said it earlier, and I'm going to say it again, I want that value that we hold so dear in this country. If I'm independent, self-sufficient, I don't need your help thank you very much. I want that to go away. And the sooner it goes away, the healthier our society is going to be. Because it's also that very thing that interferes and makes caregiving so, pardon my French, so damn difficult. Because caregivers don't come and seek help until they've been broken, until they have to go through that transition. But what forces them to go through the transition? The fact that they have to let go of the beliefs, the tribal beliefs and everything that they had in the first half of life and begin to experience this as human beings. And there was one caregiver, this was years ago, and I don't know why I did it. I don't know how I got away with it, but I did it. So he was talking to me, and I was trying to help him, and he was on this, I'm independent, and this is silly. I'm only here because other people told me to come here, all that kind of stuff. And so I don't know why, but I said, so how's your windmill working? Windmill? I don't have a windmill. Oh, so you're getting your electricity from the city? Yeah. Why would I? Oh, okay. And I said, so how's your well doing? I don't have a well. I'm on city water. Oh, you're on city water. How's your garden? You got a nice big. I don't have a garden. I go to you go to the grocery store. Okay, that's how bad our independence crap is. Because we are totally interdependent. If you want an example of what that does and the fragility of our system, go back to the depths of the pandemic when we were all, in our own homes, and most of us were praying that the truckers would continue to find ways to get stuff to the stores. I mean, the definition of essential workers changed to people who worked in grocery stores, to cashiers. They should have been essential workers way before the pandemic forced us to recognize them to be essential workers. But we never did that because of this, I'm independent. I don't need to rely on you. I'm sorry you're a cashier. I'm sorry you're not more successful and you're stuck in that job. Whatever it may be, I'm better because I don't need that. I'm independent. I can take care of myself. So we need to recognize our interdependence. Now, before I move off this real quickly, I'm what they call an energy worker. Meaning, I'm one of those weird people that I do Reiki, and some people call it healing touch or therapeutic touch. Everything, even these cabinets, the counter, the walls have energy flowing through them. And especially living things have energy flowing through them. And just by us being together in this room, we are connecting to each other. We are interdepending on each other. We've been doing that since this whole thing started. Why? Because we're in the same room and our energy field projects out. And so you're connecting to everybody else in the room. And you are connecting to everybody else in the room because that's the way our energy flows. It flows outward. Which is why the easiest way to think about it, have you ever walked into a room and there's a party going on and you're going, oh, this is a bummer. You don't want to be there because it doesn't feel like a party. Why? What you're sensing is the energy in the room. Okay? That's what you're feeling, is the energy that everybody in that room is putting out. And conversely, you could walk in the room and say, oh, yeah, this is a great party. Why? Because you're feeling all the energy in the room. Okay? So that's why, for me, this makes really, really good sense because I'm an energy worker and I know how subtly we are all connected. It is true that the wind produced by the flapping of butterfly wings on the other side of the world can produce a huge amount of energy on the opposite side of the world. That's true. They've done research where they've taken tiny little particles and they're together. And then they separate the particles and they put one particle on one side of the earth and the other particle on the other side of the earth. And then the experiment that they run is, and how they time it and do it, I've never learned, but the one particle that's on this side of the earth, they stimulate it and it produces energy. Guess what happens? This particle that's literally on the other side of the world is emanating the same energy at the same time that this one is being stimulated. It's subtle, but it's there. Which is why do we feel so good? Because the reason I'm asking this question is I'm just looking outside and looking at all of the leaves that are coming out again. So why is it we feel so good with springtime? It's the energy that's producing because everything is, quote, waking up. It's coming out of that dormant stage. And it's vibrant and it's alive and it's like, oh yeah, that feels so good. Which is why the cold, dark days of winter feel so empty and void, because that energy, it's still there, but it's gotten dormant. Okay. Task number 5, resurrecting unlived lives. The dreams we put on hold in order to get married, have a family, or have social standing in the community. The things that we do to make our parents happy, or the things that we do that we tell the kids to do to make us happy as parents. Okay? And in order to do that, you put your dreams on hold. You wanted to be a firefighter when you were a kid. Why aren't you a firefighter now? Well, because I was told I'm not big enough, I'm not strong. Something along the lines got in the way to create obstacles, and you believe those tribal beliefs, so you didn't do that. When in reality, if those weren't put in place, you might have been able to achieve that dream, but you put it on hold. Or becoming an artist. Most of us had that drummed out of us because we went to school. Because we didn't, we drew our best picture, but it didn't look like a horse. Had maybe 3 legs or 2 heads or whatever the case may be, that doesn't look like a horse, okay? And then that sets us up for, I can't do this, okay? Or the whole thing of coloring in the lines. You know, how many of you gone to the places around town where they go by different names, but you can walk in and you can create your own picture. They give you a picture to follow, and then, you can paint your own kind of thing. Okay, have you ever done that? Okay, how hard was it to do?
They let you drink while you do it. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
So my question is, you're right. So why do they let you drink?
Get you to relax and enjoy your boring painting.
To let go of those old tribal beliefs that said you can't do this. Okay. And to minimize our self-criticism. Somehow, when we're slightly liquored up and we're enjoying the wine and everything else, our self-talk, we give ourselves more permission and grace sometimes with the self-talk than if we weren't in that state. Okay. So yeah, you're right. I understand all of that, but I just find it interesting that because we've been trained to stay within the lines and we all have our own beliefs about why we can't paint, that it takes us to go someplace to say, do your best. And here's some stuff that'll help you relax. Why you do that. But resurrecting unlived lives, part of that is discovering and acknowledging the artist, the explorer, the student, the athlete, the teacher. It's the creative thing, it's the creative part of you that's trying to get out. So one of the tasks is, what are you doing in your life that is allowing you to have these, what are you doing to help them get out? Are you playing? Are you taking risks? Are you exploring? Whatever it may be. Okay? But these are the tasks to work with to begin to shed those old ways. The other thing about shedding old ways is you can help the transformation transition process by doing these tasks. Okay? Next slide. So, purpose. Purpose is pursuing these five tasks is to give our soul, our being, permission to explore and live our deepest desires. So, pursuing those 5 tasks, you're giving yourself permission to live your deepest desire. You will not get to your purpose, your deepest desire, if you do not do the 5 tasks. And you don't have to do all 5 of them, but you need to do some of them. Okay, next slide. So, you're living your life's purpose when you, and this could be all or some or one, but you're living your life's purpose when you provide an inspired approach to life that nurtures future generations. What are you doing in your life that is helping future generations to meet their potentials? We have to start asking ourselves that question a whole lot more. The second one is when you encourage others to use their potential for the common good of everyone. This isn't just about me. This isn't a solo race. Everybody else is in it with you. And how can we do this race together that helps all of us? And then when we teach and model the interconnectedness of the global community, What are you doing that models the fact that we are all interconnected? And then the last, you're living your life's purpose when you are responsible for the transmission of love and wisdom to future generations. How, and it doesn't have to be a book that lives after you die, or a movie or anything like that. It could literally be the time that you spent with a child or a young adult, and you mentored them and you nurtured them. And that's the only thing that you do. And you don't know how deeply you touch them. But without knowing that, it was life-changing for that child or teenager to be with you. And when you die, that wisdom that you shared and the part of yourself that you gave to them lives on and moves on through that person. That's where part of this life purpose we get hung up on. It has to be something spectacular. It has to be something glitzy and huge. No, it does not. If you grew up in a family where there was abuse, and because you made life choices and you got away from the family and you broke that cycle and you chose to live your life differently, you have made a huge difference in the world because you broke that cycle. Doesn't mean everybody has to break it, but you've made think about the immensity of the small act. Visualize this in your head. You're standing by, you're on a small dock in the middle of a lake. And the lake is placid, like glass. You take a rock and you drop it into the lake, and then the ripples go out. And the ripples keep going until they reach the shore. But that's what your small acts are exactly. You're taking a small rock and you're dropping it, and the ripples go out, and it changes everything. Next slide. So here's your homework.
We love homework.
List the events in your life that have transformed or changed you. Just start making the list. This is a life review. Okay? And they can be bad things and good things. Doesn't matter. Just make the list. However you want to do that. And then, after you make that list, pick some and write down what you learned about yourself and life from living through that event. And the reason I want you to write it, not type it, is because of the kinetic experience and how writing it physically impacts kinetically the brain. It has a different impact in the brain when you write it. And some people, well, I'm not going to write because I'm so sloppy at writing. That doesn't matter. I want you to make the kinetic connection and just write what that event meant to you. And do that for a number of them. And don't give yourself a timeline, and don't say, well, I've got 10 events down, and so I'm going to take one a week, which means I'll be done in 10 weeks. Don't do that. Just start with the events and then write. Because when you take the time, the other thing I've learned is sometimes it's better when it happens spontaneously rather than you say, okay, I'm going to do this at 10 o'clock every day for the next 10 weeks. Because there will be good days and yeah, it feels really good. And then there'll be other days and it's like, oh, why am I doing this? If you're feeling like, why am I doing this? Then stop. Don't do it and wait until the time feels better. What tasks, so you can go back, the tasks are shedding old ways. Have you completed to deepen your learning experience from your life events? So You do this, you write about them, and then you go back and you look and say, okay, of what I've written here, what tasks does that cover? And then what roles are you most comfortable with? So what did I learn from this? What role seems to be, what does that pointing me in terms of role in my life? And why do you feel you're being, in other words, spend time with yourself? Yeah. If you don't feel uncomfortable, spend some time with why you feel uncomfortable. That's okay. And then how do those roles connect you to your transformative life events? How do these roles connect back to here? Okay. So do that at any time. That's your ongoing homework. Next slide. So there's two things I want to conclude with. One is this quote. An individual has not started learning until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. That's why you want to find your purpose. That's why you want to discover it, because I believe most of you are already doing it. You're just not aware that you're doing it. Which is why I want you to go through those. I'm encouraging you to go through those tasks so you can discover the purpose of your life, because once you discover it, then you can begin to do things to fine-tune that and hone that and strengthen that. But the whole process is, by finding your purpose and living your purpose, you're moving from this to that. Okay? So I'm going to read something, and each of you will get a copy of this. So just soak it in. Okay? It's called A Blessing for Elders. May the light of your soul mind you. May all of your worry and anxiousness about becoming old be transfigured. May you be given a wisdom with the eye of your soul to see this beautiful time of harvesting. May you have the commitment to harvest your life, to heal what has hurt you, to allow it to become closer to you, and to become one with you. May you have great dignity. May you have a sense of how free you really are. And above all, may you be given the wonderful gift of meeting the eternal life and beauty that is within you. May you be blessed, and may you find a wonderful love in yourself for yourself. Thank you.